Hi everyone, my name is Ashley and I'm a multicultural and LGBTQ intern for the center. Just a comment to the speakers. Even though you have a microphone, you need to project because if you're not projecting, then the speakers won't do much. What is it? Sorry. If you don't know the person sitting next to you, take a quick moment to say hello.
No, you have to sit next to me and keep me calm.
We're good? Okay. First, I want to take this moment to recognize that we're on occupied land. This is Haudenosaunee land. Also, you can sign up for the WMST outreach on the clipboard. That's going to be passed out or pointed out.
It's on the counter there.
If you're not already on the mailing list, tonight at 7 p.m. in Golden Auditorium, there's an alternative cinema screening called Paris is Burning, so you can check that out. Tomorrow you can join Lasso at La Casa at 4:30, and Benny will tell you more afterward, to celebrate Dia de los Muertos. If you'd like to bring something to add to their altar, you're welcome to do so. Thursday at 4:30 p.m. in Person Auditorium, ASU presents Feminism Through an African Lens. And also, there's really great attendance at Brown Bags, and that's awesome. But I think sometimes, as feminists, we don't do a good job supporting all forms of feminism. So that'd be great if you could show up for that event as well. Next week's Brown Bag will be with Frequency, a Black poet that's part of the Black Lives Matter movement, and also speaks about reproductive justice. So don't miss her. Just a couple of reminders. The audience, we all know you have classes and stuff like that, and that's completely fine. Just make sure that you're as quiet as possible. We're trying to exit the center because when you're leaving, people are still talking. Also, please clean up after yourselves. In the back is our garbage cans and also what is it? Our recycle and everything like that. Everything's super labeled, so it's no confusion. Oh, also if you stay to the very end, you can help us put away chairs. That'd be super nice. Thank you all for being here, and today we are so excited to host the staff of our new Survivor Support Center, Haven. Please help us in welcoming them.
Hello, everybody. Thank you so much for being here. It's great to see so many faces who come out to learn more about our sexual violence response here on campus. As you know, walking in the door, the topic today is such that it may bring up emotions for people who are in different places with different things. And I just want you to be aware of that. If there are things that we're talking about and it's important for you to take care of yourself, that is the top priority. So please find room to self-care throughout our talk and throughout your work, really, because you have to do that all the time. I am LaFrance. I am the director of the Counseling Center and the director of Haven. I get to work with some awesome people up here with me, and they'll all introduce themselves too. I've worked here at Colgate for 14 years. I started at Colgate as a postdoc, came right here out of the internship, and I have stayed ever since. I'm really glad that I get to expand what I do and do different things, and I'm really proud that I'm able to work with the other folks at Haven doing really important work now.
I'm Natasha Torres. I'm the fellow at Haven this year. I also graduated from Colgate in 2015. My background is in education and learning things.
Hello, I'm Denise Contreras. I'm Assistant Director of Survivor Support Services, as well as one of the counselors on campus. I have been with Colgate with the Counseling Center for 2 years, and I've been going on my 3rd year here at Colgate.
Hi everyone, I'm Rochelle Robinson. I'm the advocate from Liberty Resources Victims of Violence Program. I'm going to be here on campus on Tuesdays. The timing is a little, can kind of vary, but I'll be around. So hopefully we get to kind of know some of you guys, and I'll pass it on.
Hi, everybody. My name is Dennis Dougherty. I'm an investigator with the state police. I've been assigned recently, within the past 8 months, I believe, to a new unit in the state police that was created by Governor Cuomo's Enough is Enough legislation. Our unit is known as the Campus Sexual Assault Victims Unit. So in this unit, I've got kind of two different missions. One is working with campus communities at events like this, and really any efforts that we can make for prevention of sexual assault in the first place. And ultimately, our goal is to increase reporting and make access to law enforcement easier for college communities. So we're doing that in a lot of different forums. And the other mission that we have in our unit is actually responding to and investigating reports of sexual assaults that occur on college campuses. So that's what I've been doing for the past 8 months. My background, I've been a member of the state police for 17 years. The past 10 years before this assignment, I was an investigator in back room, is what those units are referred to, where we investigated all kinds of felonies from homicides to sexual assaults and robberies. So it's been certainly a challenge and an enjoyment for me to be able to hopefully help out on college campuses with this particular issue now.
Okay, so I'm going to start off a little bit about counseling center services and by extension Haven, so that you all can understand sort of where we're coming from, and we're all starting at the same place. So the counseling center, I've worked there for quite a long time. Haven is an extension of the counseling center. So if you call the Haven extension, it's the same as calling the counseling center extension. You'll talk to Amanda Bridge, who is our office manager, and we'll get you in touch with one of us. We're in a different location, but we're very closely connected, and we plan on staying very closely connected in the work that we do. The other counselors who we work with at the counseling center also can help students and who have been affected by sexual violence or other forms of violence also. But we have a specific focus of doing that over in Haven. Some of the other counselors will spend time at Haven. So we have an office that Rochelle works out of when she's here that also is going to be shared with the other counselors. We run some groups out of both the counseling center and out of Haven. So the one of the groups that we run out of Haven now is Survivors of Sexual Assault. But we also run several other groups out of Haven that have more of a general counseling focus. So as you can see, there's a lot of collaboration between the two departments, and I think that that's really important so that we can give people a variety of options of who they get to work with. So I kind of wanted to give you that background to start off with. We just had our formal opening of Haven last month, and I saw a lot of you there, so I really appreciate you already coming out to support Haven and all the work that we do. And we're hoping to do a lot more, but this has been quite a semester already. We've already kind of kicked it out of the field pretty quick. We've had a lot going on. We've been pretty busy, but we see this year as a year of relationship building and collaborations and outreach. We certainly will do the clinical work, but we expect that to increase over time as people know that Haven is a possibility. We work through Haven and also at the counseling center from a trauma-informed clinical perspective, meaning that we understand people experience trauma in many different ways, and we also know that people heal from trauma in many different ways. There is not one cookie cutter approach to helping people who have been traumatized. Specifically here we're talking about sexual violence, but all forms of violence, all forms of trauma. I specifically do a couple of approaches that are helpful for trauma victims, including EMDR, which is eye movement desensitization reprocessing, and clinical hypnosis. And a number of other people on staff do different kinds of specialties. So there's different things that you can learn about when you come over. We also offer biofeedback for people, and that helps a variety of different things. So I kind of wanted to give that as a basis of what Haven is, where we're going with things, and then I wanted to ask my colleagues to talk about some of the more specific outreach endeavors that we're already taking on and doing, and then maybe we can go from there. I know that there is a basket going around, right? Okay, maybe you can talk about that.
Okay, yeah, so Allie has it right now, but if there are any questions that come up, and maybe we'll also have Q&A at the end, but if you want to write down a question, put it in the basket. If you're not comfortable with standing up and then asking it, we'll answer questions that way. In terms of what I've been doing as a fellow, I think because this position's so new, it's kind of very open and kind of open into a direction that I, as an individual filling the position, can take it. So as of right now, this semester, I've worked really closely with this is not a play about sex. So from providing, like in that capacity, I provided support in terms of like helping them with their budget and things like that, but also just serving as like a support system and as like a staff member on campus who's seeing them, hearing them, and like trying to support them in any capacity that I can. So I did that this past semester. I've also been working with Yes Means Yes and plan on working a little bit in more depth next semester too. But just really meeting with, we have two interns, which are Jake Marr and Grace Thomas. So meeting with them, checking in, really seeing how things are going, especially because it's such a important program on campus that's really addressing a lot of issues regarding sexual violence. And then outside of that, me and Denise have been doing some outreach in individual classes. So kind of going in, like we've covered, I've had the opportunity to cover Professor Steinhaus' intro women's studies class and just talk about like rape culture, definitions, getting people to like start thinking about the conversation and relating it to feminism. We also did an FSEM course that was specifically, I forgot what the course is called, I'm sorry. But yeah, so like we've been doing that kind of outreach. I've also, exactly like going off of what Don was saying, coming into this position, I understand that like other people on campus are doing this work and have been doing this work. So really seeing how Haven can collaborate and be in conversation with those doing the work. Because again, I think it's important, yes, we exist, but also like there are other people who have been doing this work and have been creating these spaces for people. So how can we be a part of that, support that, and also in the future, like create more events together and things like that. So that's kind of what I've been doing, and that's from working closely with Allie, who's been doing a lot of great work through the Women's Studies Center, to the network and just meeting different groups on campus who are doing this work and have been, and also Colleen as well. So really trying to develop relationships through this first semester, because again, new position, kind of trying to figure out what that's going to look like. Some things that I've been thinking through in terms of the future are like workshops specifically, but also holding space within Haven, kind of balancing Haven as like a space for where people can seek resources and counselors, but also like what else could Haven look like? Could we do like events where we're like reading poetry or like creating artwork, trying to develop new ways of like thinking about healing and providing support systems. So those are things that are coming up. We're also hopefully creating an intern position for Haven for next semester that will I'll be supervising. So that's in the works as well. We've also been talking about getting students trained through VOV for the hotline. So that's been in the works. So it's like a lot of projects in the works, but yeah, I'm really excited about the things that will be coming up within next semester and the next upcoming years. I'm just trying to make sure I hit everything. Yeah.
Thank you. One of the reasons why I wanted to come today is to introduce the people who work in Haven, as well as our counterparts off campus. Sometimes something's just thrown together, or even like in my previous job, something was just thrown together, but you don't know who the people are in the background. So we really wanted to show you faces, as well as not just see faces on the internet and to see this is the person that's working there, but to actually see what we do, who we are, some of the specialties that are up here, and try to have more of a connectedness. I'm all about having that connectedness and being with that person. So some of the things I wanted to cover is, first off, the reason why Haven exists today. We had last semester, how many of you are aware of the Speak Out as well as the human chain that happened not so far from this area? So there's a lot of people here, and we didn't know what it was going to look like at that point. And so for me, thinking about reflecting was the fact that these students stood up, asked questions, demanded for answers, as well as how did staff, faculty, students, the board of trustees, and I see some administrators here that made this happen for students. But also it's about the students who basically stood up. There were about 600 students who were present at the chapel who talked about sexual violence, different forms of it, and it was their narratives that we remember that they were not just statistics, but it was about the narratives and stories that made that change and that made this happen, as well as Natasha had said, we're collaborating. We're not the sole keepers. We are here because of the space, and we have students that are coming in just to study. It's a space now for them. But then we also collaborate with other departments here, and we look forward to doing that. So it's because of the students, it's because of everybody who got involved that made that happen for us. And I feel very privileged, very lucky to be in this position. So I also wanted to talk about a little bit about what it looks like for me, as well as maybe someone else, maybe someone you know who experienced sexual violence, but in a counseling form, and if they're in a session. Lots of times there's a stigma with coming to a counseling center, which is true. It makes sense. And what does it look like in a session? I always have people who come in for about 15 minutes just to ask that question. And I show them the space. And just to, and as well as so they can show the space, but also know that it's an open space to walk in and to become familiar with. I do work off of the social justice model. I believe in that social justice model through social work. I've also been able to share that with my peers, my colleagues in the counseling center. And what does that look like? We talk about anti-oppression perspective. We also acknowledge the intersectionality as well as inclusivity. I know that we use these words, but we try to actually look at our own personal bias and then how do we make that change as well, and what privilege we have in the counseling seat and who comes across, who's sitting across from us. We also talk about rape culture and also the racist assumptions about who perpetrates sexual violence, and we try to also talk about and change the norms with that. We can't change the norms without understanding oppression. I think it's very important so that we do that in the counseling center, but we also do that in our one-on-one sessions to hear students and what their experiences are. My approach is very holistic. I do also work with cognitive behavioral therapies and as well as strength perspectives. And it's not always perfect in session, meaning that I do not have a set agenda. It is about holding space for a student when they come in. There is self-blame, there is self-doubt, and we sit with those, and that is for the student. So whenever we go about these things, some of the things that people could expect is actual body movement, but that takes time too. We also, I do a lot of my sessions back to back because I think it's important to build rapport. And it's only for a short period of time because we're coming into a space. The first session is usually about 30 minutes, so it's not enough to make that connectedness. But it is enough time and information for a person to know what to expect possibly when they get back for the next session. So I have about 2 to 3 sessions back to back, and then we end up going into a every other week, just to build some type of rapport and understand where we're coming from. I think it's important that I understand where the student's coming from. They're coming to me, and let's see what we can do to work together. I also work with the 7 generations type of healing. We know this quote about we heal ourselves in 7 generations. We heal those before us as well as after us. So my work is based upon, and some of it is based upon generation work. Now, is this for everyone? No, it's not, but I do ask, or I even engage or even try to see who is willing to go there and in that direction, but it doesn't have to be that as well. I also have a cognitive behavioral therapy and the theories that I was taught in social work. I really do believe in the empowerment part, re-empowerment. And there is no perfect solution or way, and I'm not trying to fix anyone. I attempt to fix cars, but it doesn't work out. So just know that I'm not trying to fix anyone in session. I'm trying to be a supporter, an advocate, a person that has a position that can voice things, but there is confidentiality always in my sessions. And one of the things I really enjoy doing is the writing, journaling techniques, as well as body movement, releasing some of this stress, the trauma that is held within the body, as well as the breathing techniques, because I'm trying to do that right now as I'm in front of you all. And there are many places that we go in reference to a session, and a session is about an hour long, and sometimes it drags minute by minute, but then it also flies by at times. And it just depends on the person and how I'm also and how I check in whenever I come into a session, and being sure that whenever I come into a session, I'm present for that person. So that's my approach, and I just wanted to welcome and open the doors to any questions after this session, after this.
Thanks. I think before I turn over to the two of you, if that's okay, I want to add a little bit more about my approach too. I so appreciate what you just shared with the group, and I think that's really helpful. So to take down some of that barrier about coming to counseling, because I realize that that's there. Luckily, a lot of students at Colgate seek out our resource, and we have very high utilization numbers, but we know that we don't reach everybody. So it's important to know sort of what you're walking into. So I really liked what Denise just shared with you all, because it gave me a good sense of what might happen if you come sit with Denise in a session. I go from a family systems, systemic broadly. I include lots of people in families. I think that we're biologically connected to some people in families and not biologically connected to other people who I consider family. So I think of like community systems a lot, but also I go from a narrative perspective when I work with students. Sometimes when people are traumatized, what happens is memories get stored in parts of the brain that it's really hard to get to, and it's hard to talk about them. So they might come up at the worst possible time. And that's why we try to, when we can, present people with content warnings or trigger warnings in case that happens, but we can't warn everybody about everything, right? We've all been caught off guard at times. And sometimes that's because something in the brain was triggered really quickly and you went from 0 to 100, and you went from calm to panic, right? So in order to get to that stuff, sometimes it's hard to talk about that. And sometimes you may know what you want to say and you can't say it, but sometimes you may not even know what it is. You may not even remember what happened to you. So that's where some of the some subconscious work comes from, and that's why I do some things like clinical hypnosis, EMDR. The movement stuff that Denise does is really helpful because we store pain in our minds, but we store it in our bodies too. So there's other ways to get at it. So when you think of sort of traditional psychotherapy, and you might think of somebody talking to you while you're lying on a couch, that is not at all what we are doing. We are really interacting with people. We although there is going to be a hierarchy because you're coming to my office, I try to eliminate that as much as possible because you're your own expert. I'm just helping you to figure out things. I am not your guide. I am sort of standing next to you as we're figuring it out together, and I'm asking questions so that you can get to where you need to go. The narrative perspective helps you put a story into what happened. So you'll find that people feel better if they're able to narrate what happened to them so they can put it somewhere in their storyline. And with that, we accept it. We may not ever forgive what happened, but we accept it as part of our history so we can move forward as more informed people. So that's where that narrative perspective comes from. We have to work out of a short-term model whenever we can because of the limits and the demands here. But even within that, we're able to do this pretty effectively, especially if people decide to do group along with their individual counseling. So hopefully that gives you a little flavor of where we're both coming from.
Thanks, guys. So, is this working? Okay. So, I didn't get a chance to really explain too much about myself initially, but I am born and raised in this county. I've lived here my whole life. I went to college at Niagara University and I studied there for 4 years, so I have my bachelor's in social sciences and Spanish. Initially, as I was going through school, you guys know this all too well, where you're like, I think I want to do this, and then you're like, oh no, I think I want to do that. And so that was kind of my life, and when I had graduated, I had initially, I was thinking about maybe going into helping folks with addictions, different types of addictions, generally, drug and alcohol. And so that was really what I was looking for, and this job kind of fell into my lap a little bit. My mom worked for Liberty Resources for quite some time, and she had suggested that I, check out their website, see what kind of careers they had available. And I saw this, and I said, wow, that seems really interesting. I think I'd like to, check that out. So I applied, and interviewed, got the job, and I have not looked back ever since. I've worked at Liberty for a little over a year now. My experience there has been, initially I was, learning the crisis work, getting trained initially on the hotline, making sure that I was able to provide that service. And then also, I was taken under the wing of one of the longtime members of our staff, Carlene Holt, and she is an advocate with the district attorney's office. So I spent time there with her, learning from her, going through the criminal justice process with folks and helping them understand what's happening, even if maybe I didn't know what was happening at the time. Sometimes, it can be rather confusing. And so being able to be there for people and being able to walk through that with them, whether, sometimes it's better to be with someone and kind of figuring out rather than kind of walking around like a zombie, like, I don't know what's going on. And so I try my best to kind of be there in that way. I don't always have a lot of answers. I feel very much like Natasha does in her role right now of just trying to figure it all out. This is all very brand new. And so I'm just really learning how to shape my role on each campus. I'm supposed to be on each college campus 1 day a week. So I also spend time at Casanova College and at Morrisville State. So I'm just learning a lot about each campus as they are. Each climate is completely different. And so just figuring out where I can fit in best. So I know that, I have my office at Haven, that I'll be spending time there. But just, having the opportunity to make connections with different folks on campus, different student leaders, really anyone that wants to connect with me, I'm so open to that. I don't really want to set any limits at this point with anything. I want to really be open and kind of hearing feedback from people to see what's wanted and what's needed. And having these folks behind me, being able to kind of guide me and show me the way, the Colgate way, I'm learning a lot, and I think that I really do look forward to the partnerships that we can create to be able to assist students and help you guys get what you need, and also faculty, staff, really whoever. But I've worked closely with Denny over the past, I guess, worked with you since I kind of started doing investigations, being present for people who maybe want to go through the law enforcement route, and just really the words that come to mind are advocacy, support, just being present and being able to walk through the processes with people, because they can be really intimidating and really confusing. So I think the best way that I'm going to be able to help on campus, at least for now, before I try to sort through defining my role a little bit better, is just being able to provide information, being able to you come to me and say, okay, so what if I go this way? What if I do this? What if I do that? What's it going to look like? And I'm going to be able to try to shed some light on how that might look. I can't guarantee that every process is going to look the same every time, but being able to take some of the unknown out of it is, really what I hope to be able to accomplish. And then, over the course of the next, I don't know, like 6 weeks, I guess, is left in the semester, I don't really know. Being able to kind of talk about what kinds of things I'm going to be able to do on campus and fostering those relationships, talking about, going into classrooms, having workshops, the conversation is really open. So I invite you to, if you have questions, I don't know if that basket is still going around or, oh, it's back here, okay. I invite you to, ask questions about, really anything that you want to know about either, myself or the rest of our, I guess I'm going to call us like a team now. So, really anything at all. And I hope that, I get a chance to really connect with some of you guys and be able to really provide the help that you're looking for.
So just before we got started, I was telling Rochelle about an opportunity I had recently where we had from our unit, the Campus Sexual Assault Victims Unit, had a training opportunity where we met with a group of 8 survivors of sexual assault that occurred on college campuses, and had an opportunity to sit and to listen to them and to their experiences. Does anybody have any guesses about what was the worst part of their experiences? It was a common theme across the board. Anybody have any guesses?
dealing with policing.
Perfect, absolutely. That's what it was. We've got to be honest about it. Law enforcement has not historically done the best job dealing with victims and survivors of sexual assaults and with really conducting investigations into sexual assaults. So that was a really good opportunity, I think, for all of us who were there to kind of get to meet people and put faces to stories that happened. It was a very powerful thing. I was telling Rochelle, I walked out of there not feeling good at all, you know what I mean? But it was something that was really important and really motivating for me personally. So in this position, if there's a sexual assault that occurs on this campus, it's very likely that I'm going to be the face that is going to be here. And it's important to me that I'm going to do everything that I can to, number one, treat people appropriately, to understand trauma, and I'm learning a lot. Like I said, I've been in this role for 8 months, and I'm continuing to learn a lot every day, and I'm learning a lot from people here at Colgate, from working with Rochelle, and on a lot of other different campuses as well. So I want to talk quickly about, I mentioned that one of the most important roles that we have in our unit is to try to increase reporting. Certainly we know, I think that we all know, that sexual assaults on college campuses, it's a huge problem. And we know research is telling us that most instances of sexual assault that occur on campus are never being reported to the police. And then beyond that, we know that those that are being reported are often being mishandled and they're not being successfully dealt with. So we've been taking a look at that and, what can we do that's better? So in my travels thus far, we've really identified several problems that we have very easily been able to overcome. And I hope that when we're done here, if anybody has any ideas about what else we can do, please bring them up, because we truly do want to do a better job. One thing that keeps coming up, and it was actually addressed by Governor Cuomo's Enough is Enough legislation, is oftentimes drugs and alcohol are an issue that surrounds a sexual assault. And oftentimes the victim or the survivor of that sexual assault doesn't want to come forward because they're afraid that they're going to be in trouble with the police if underage drinking was part of what happened, or if drug use was part of what happened. So that issue was really already addressed by the Enough is Enough legislation, where there's an amnesty provision where that victim of sexual assault will never be prosecuted. They cannot be arrested. We will not do anything like that. And the same exists on campus. You're not going to be in trouble on campus for drug or alcohol use if you come forward to report sexual assault. So that was one big thing that hopefully will be helpful. Another thing, oftentimes students are indicating that they don't want their parents to find out. As a student here, I assume that most, if not all, students here are 18 years old or older. We're not going to contact parents. You're here, you're an adult, you're making your own decisions. We're not going to call home and tell somebody's parent or guardian or anything like that about what's going on, unless we're asked to do that. In which case, then we'd be happy to share information. Some other issues that we found where people don't want to report to the police is really they're intimidated by the process and feel like they're going to lose control over what happens. If you come forward and you report to the police, are you going to be compelled to testify? The short answer to that is that absolutely not. We're really doing everything that we can to take a victim-centered approach to everything that we're doing. When I begin an investigation, if at any time during that case the victim or the reporting party of that case no longer wants this case to continue, they can tell me to stop anytime they want, and that's going to be respected. And we will absolutely stop. If we investigate a case that results in an arrest and ultimately that person doesn't feel like they're going to be able to testify and that testimony is going to be required, nobody's going to force them to do that. So those are some issues that we've addressed right up front that seem to be preventing people to come forward, that often when I'm meeting with people and explaining the process, they're a little bit more comfortable to engage with us from the law enforcement side. So beyond that, going around to groups like this, one interesting thing that came out of a very similar event to this was somebody stood up and said, I came forward and wanted to make a report, and then a uniformed police officer showed up and asked me what happened, and then said I had to go meet with an investigator, so then I had to go to the police station, and so we took a look at it. State police has been around for a long time. The first troopers rode around on horses, and amazingly, a lot of things that they started doing on horseback, we still do today. But I took a look at that. Why do we have to send a trooper out to take an initial report? Doesn't make any sense. Why does a survivor of a sexual assault have to go to the police station? They're not comfortable there. There's with technology today, it's very easy for me to bring my tablet along and do it right here on campus or at a Dunkin' Donuts or wherever. It doesn't matter. So very simple things like that. Hopefully we're going to be able to make ourselves more accessible and do a better job. The other thing, a lot of survivors of sexual assault might be intimidated by a police officer. That's why I think it's really cool to be here personally, and so that at least you know my face and have met me, and that's important. But the reality is that meeting with an old gray-haired guy to talk about an issue like this might not be the most comfortable thing in the world. So how do we do better? One thing that we've worked into our protocol now is I'm never going to be coming to a campus by myself. I'm either going to be coming to meet at Haven with somebody from the counseling center, if that's what makes the survivor most comfortable, or all the time. I've got Rochelle's cell phone number, and I drive her nuts. Every time I got a case, hey Rochelle, I need you to come, let's go. And we've done it in the middle of the night. We've done it. That's just the way that we're doing it, unless somebody very specifically doesn't want somebody from the whatever campus is involved in the loop. Then Rochelle's not part of the campus, she's part of Liberty Resources. I'm not employed by Colgate or any other university. We could do it without the college being aware of it. So those are kind of some of the things that we're doing to try to make ourselves more accessible, trying to do a much better job of having a victim-centered approach to how we're doing business. To this point, and I don't say this to brag, because really anything that happens because of the strength of a survivor of a sexual assault coming forward in the first place and then engaging with us in the second place. But during this semester, to date, we've had 11 reports of sexual assaults that I've personally investigated. Of those, right now, 3 times we've already made arrests on the case. A 4th one, we've already developed enough probable cause where I'm ready to make an arrest, and we're waiting to hear from the survivor whether they really want to continue this process or not. A little bit up in the air, but that's a 4th case that's ready to make an arrest. 5th case where the suspect has left the area, but we've got enough to charge him. That will be happening quickly. 4 other ones that still are being investigated. We're waiting for things from the lab, that kind of a thing, and continuing to investigate some cases. To date, only 1 case that has been reported to us has been closed without sufficient evidence to pursue it. I don't know what will happen with those other 4. We'll see what happens. But the reason that I bring that up is I know that there's a perception on a lot of college campuses that there's nothing that can be done, that there's no one who cares, that there's not a professional response to these things. It's not true. We're going to do everything that we can. When I sit and meet with a survivor of a sexual assault, I've got sisters, I've got a daughter, I've got nieces, I've got nephews, I've got cousins. I take personal ownership in that. I can promise you that on this campus, I will be here, I will be involved in any case that comes in, and I will give my absolute best shot at any case that comes in. So, if anybody has any questions for any of us?
I just want to ask. Yeah, sure. And then as I said, because I think what we wanted to do too was like introduce everyone to like kind of everyone's praxis and how they are approaching the work that they're doing. So I didn't get a chance to share mine. Just things that I'm thinking through as like this position, because I don't have formal training. I'm not a counselor, but I do get to work with 2 amazing people who are mentoring me and teaching me a lot. But for me, like coming into this work is also understanding that sexual violence is connected to many other forms of violence and state violence, and how that affects different bodies and different people given who you are. So that's kind of the reason as to like thinking about why I took this position, why I want to come back to me, like anti-violence work is connected to racism, anti-classism, like all the isms. So for me, like this isn't a separate conversation. And that's something that I'm always trying to negotiate and think about as I'm like interacting with people, the events that I'm making, what like what I'm reading, how I'm trying to educate myself as well, because I do also understand that I have my own gaps and my own biases and my own things that I need to put to the forefront in thinking about how I can even support someone else. And also to like understanding how this is outside of Colgate's campus too, like how it affects other communities. And just also how it's historically rooted in like the foundations of this country, like colonialism, how sexual violence was used as a tool to rape women and people and really, yeah. So those are things that I've been thinking about. And also another thing that I really value about working on this team too is that we do professional development, that like we read books together, and we read Queer and Sexual Violence, which was also a suggested reading for this brown bag, but just thinking about how we can nuance the conversation regarding sexual violence and understand that it like there's this dominant narrative of who is the perpetrator and who is the survivor or victim, and really complicating that and thinking about how it affects trans Black women or LGBTQ, how that plays out. And another thing is as well that I've also been thinking about is how healing manifests differently for different people, and that's going to look differently, and how like in my head I have this idea of what healing looks like, and that could be so different to somebody else, especially given who they are and who's coming into that door. And not to say that like every interaction that I have is perfect, I'm still learning and things like that, but I think in thinking about how to be a support system, an ally, and even like my own experiences, the sport I needed, just really thinking through that. So those are things that I just wanted to put out there too as well, because I think it's important for you all to see us as well as like humans, and like we're thinking through things and trying to challenge our own the messed up messages that we've received on like how we've learned about sexual violence and a lot of other isms. So with that, I just wanted to open it up for questions. Well, how do you manage self-care when supporting survivors? Do you want to go?
Well, I would just imagine like self-care for ourselves as clinicians or supporters, or for the, how do we talk about? I feel like it's for myself.
Yeah, I think it's
I feel like it's for myself. I try to go to the gym all the time, but I don't always make it, so I enjoy eating. But at the same time though, whenever I go into a space or even my own space, and things do come up, I actually, and I have a partner that I've always learned from as well, and I continuously surround myself with people that I can reach out to, but then also before I go into a session, I'm spraying some sage. I am also burning sage at the end of the night if there's something that's heavy and it stays with me. These stories, these narratives, also find its way of transferring into body. So this is how I feel in my own approach. So that's what I do. I have a partner who got me one of those lamps. What are those? There you go, salt lamps. And then I also have this salt, this little salt soap that I use to cleanse my own body for every night. So it becomes a ritual when I'm in the shower. It becomes a ritual for me to take these deep breaths at the end of the day, or even just like right now, I've been deep breathing, just to take care of myself. I also have my own counselor that I go to Syracuse to process some of the things that I process or what comes up for me. So and it's available to me, and luckily I'm given the time if I need to do that, because that's what's going to sustain me here in this position or in any position. So I mean, like it's from exercising to I love community. Like I'm all about community. I love being around people, and sometimes I'm just like separate myself from my work and just to be and get energy, but then I also try to give it right back. You know, I've learned to actually not just work out and run, but my astrologer, she says you need to walk at least 30 minutes a day. Walk. Not walk with an intention of I need to get from point A to point B, not be on your phone, but you need to walk, breathe, take in what the beauty around you, ask for your own guides, your spiritual guides, your grandmother, to support you in this. That's part of the seven generational healing that I'm asking that the women before me, the men after me, the men before me, to help me. As how I identify also, my ancestors are always with me, so I'm asking them to help me during these walks. So I mean, there's so many things that I do in different ways, but I can't just pinpoint because sometimes it doesn't always work. So I go to the next thing. I have a mental list of okay, let me start here, and if it doesn't work, let me go here. And sometimes I just watch trash TV. So it all depends on that day. At the end of the day, I always have to take that shower. I always have to take that shower. That's self-care. I mean, and it shifts every day. And as well as what's a really great benefit now that I have that I didn't have before is that I can process with my supervisor. And that like is a big deal to me too because sometimes we're not given the room to mess up or make mistakes. So I process with this boss over here of mine. I like to say boss, but what do I need to do better or differently, and also process my own internal things that happen within because countertransference can happen. It is real. It's sitting on this side. And so I have someone that I can bounce ideas off and learn from as well and do that exchange. And I didn't have that prior to coming to Colgate. 6 years in a position and I was trying to learn in different areas, but the person that I needed to talk with was my own supervisor. And that makes me a better clinician by being here, by working with Don. So I also have that professional development as well as I see some of my peers, my colleagues in the counseling center. That's what helps with self-care as well as growth professionally.
Good
So
answer.
now, when you work with people like this, I think for me too, like I've realized more and more that self-care, again, like it's like there's multiple iterations of it and there's like not one because sometimes I'm like, oh, I got it, like I'm good, and then I'm like, it didn't work. I'm still struggling here. So I think really I think working with Denise and Dawn has also been a very like different experience coming. I got to work a year out like back in my hometown at a small nonprofit, and that experience is so different. Having supervisors who really like see you and like check in with you intentionally, and like it's not just like did you get this done, like no, it's about like how are you doing, how did this go. I think having people and also like learning new rituals and things like that. I think being back in this community, there is a lot of amazing people who are also like struggling and getting and trying to figure out how to work through things and how to wake up every day and still like go to class or still support other people, and really like having that sense of community has been great to have again, which is like it's interesting as a student. It was like, oh, I can't wait to like go out and like that. But for me too, like a lot of that has been really like trying to find new ways of being, and whether that's the gym and also like being disconnected too. I think I realize that even when I'm thinking I'm like taking me time, I'm not. Like I'm on my email or I'm like still on the internet or something like that, and really taking intentional space to be like, let's think about how today went. Like, how are you? Like, how actually, like, are you doing? And really being real with yourself, because I think a lot of times, like, I'm very good at compartmentalizing, and especially like I feel like doing this specific work, there are times where I'm very triggered. And how do I like allow myself to leave the space and take space for myself without feeling like I'm then not supporting other people. And I think that's the biggest part for me is like it's really balancing that and understanding like when I can, take a couple steps back and be like, the situation I'm probably going to be triggered with, but what can I do and what am I going to do afterwards and being really intentional and not just being like, okay, I'm going to leave and like whatever. So those are some of the things that I've been thinking through, but also helping support systems. And a lot of my friends are amazing. And I'm still connected to a lot of people that graduated from Colgate who are also doing a lot of like work on their own, in their own fields and their own things, and really like being a community where we're sharing tips on how to take care of ourselves. And whether that looks like leaving campus for the weekends or, I don't know, like watching Bob's Burgers with friends. Like little things like that. Those are like small revolutions, I think, in my mind. And those are some of the things that I try to do to like perform or like to practice self-care.
Okay, I know a lot of people are getting ready to leave, so I thought that maybe I'd just let you know what the other two questions are in case you're wondering. One of them is what's the work that you've done or plan to do with student organizations, and then the other one is what's the hardest thing about doing what you do. I think I might. Maybe we can take whichever one we want as we go, but I think I'm just going to talk about what's the hardest thing about doing what I do. I think it's sometimes hearing story after story after story, and even when Denny was talking about how many people have come through their investigations, I'm really glad to hear that people are doing that. But the numbers are huge, and I know that a lot of people aren't reporting at the same time, and that can be really heavy. If we do this hour after hour after hour, then that can be a lot. So I really appreciate the self-care discussion. But there are times in the semester where it is harder and harder to take care of yourself because it is the busy time in the semester. So I think that can be a challenge. And the other thing, I'll keep it real with you all. The hardest thing is when someone comes in and our personalities don't match, and I just don't really like that person very much. And honestly, I mean, you have to find a good therapist for yourself. And I'm kind of saying that to give you permission that if you come over and meet with a therapist that you don't click with and don't think you can do good work with, talk to us about getting you a new therapist because there's other therapists. And sometimes the click just isn't there, and we both have to acknowledge that. And it's okay. Instead of trying so hard when you're not going anywhere, it's better just to say, hey, Denise, do you mind if I refer this person to you? I just think you'll work out better with that person. If we have a collaborative team like that, then we can get the needs met of the students. So.
What about you and hardest thing maybe?
Yeah, I should have clarified this first. When I brought up those case numbers before, those are not particular to Colgate.
Right, yeah,
Was
I
that
knew,
clear?
no, I knew that, but
Okay, I
the
don't know if
numbers are
everybody
still
else
very
did.
big.
So I'm assigned to kind of central New York, the Syracuse area, Utica area. So those numbers are not particular to this campus, yeah. For me, that's a ground ball question. The hardest part of my job is when I get a report of a sexual assault that occurred, and I believe 100% that it did occur, and I give it my best shot, but I come up short, and don't have enough evidence to make a criminal case. That's the kind of stuff that keeps you up at night, It happens, and you do everything that you want, but the very worst discussion that you can have is to go back and meet with the person who reported this to you and tell them, I'm sorry, we don't have enough. That stinks.
Mm-hmm.
Real briefly, that it keeps happening. It's what I said earlier, but it's also that it continues to happen between across all gender spectrums, and it also starts with the relationship violence. Not starting there, but that it's still happening, and there are times when I feel very powerless, and just knowing that it overall that it continues to happen, and it's a heartbreak that it happens.
I'll share. Also, I think the hardest thing for me is that I'm born and raised here, and I work in the community in which I live and lived. And so, aside from, not just things that occur on a college campus, but just I remember one of the hardest days for me so far has been a day that a sexual assault was reported from my hometown. and it was someone that I had went to high school with, who was the perpetrator, and like seeing all that on social media and seeing people's reactions of people that I was once friends with or am acquainted with, and just seeing all the ignorance out there that people just really don't understand. And I remember calling my mom that day after work, and I can feel myself feeling emotional about it now, but I was just like, I feel so bad for this girl who had to go through that and now is, being blown up on social media for details that were shared by the media that really are not all inclusive details of the case. And how can you, and then of course being on the other end of it and knowing a little more information and then being really frustrated with the fact that people are blaming her and blaming her parents and blaming this and blaming that. And that was definitely the worst day that I've had so far working that I can remember, where I was just so beyond upset about that. And so circling back to self-care and just making sure that you're not only doing things internally for yourself, mindfulness, breathing, but also externally, being like I do yoga pretty regularly, and that's both, internal, external, and just being sure that, you're kind of combining both of those things together, because you can't, so in self-care and just being educated about self-care and like continuing to learn about it, like it's a very fluid process for me. Like I'm just trying to figure out like what works for me on whatever day it is, honestly, because I'm just like, today I'm gonna go home and I might have a glass of wine, or tomorrow I'm gonna go home and I'm gonna do like an hour straight of yoga and like throw my phone like across the room because I just don't want to see it anymore. And and something that is helpful for me is that I have two phones. I have my work phone and then I have my personal phone. And at first, when I started the job, I didn't have both. And then I kind of got going and I was like, I cannot have this connected to my personal, I need to separate the worlds. So by separating my worlds and being able, it's just so wonderful when I get home at night and it's like, 4:30, 5 o'clock and my work day is done and I'm like, click, turn it off, put it in my purse and wait till, the following morning when I can, plug back in again, I guess. So that's something that's very helpful.
Are there any other questions? Programming? So I kind of mentioned, so we've specifically done, and met with a lot of the students who are on campus who are doing specific work to sexual violence and intimate partner violence. So we've met with the network, One Love, Yes Means Yes, we're acquainted with, This Is Not a Play About Sex. But I think moving in the future, I think it would be beneficial to meet with other just student groups in general to maybe like find ways that we can collaborate and get into the spaces and share a space and have a conversation, because I think that it shouldn't just be specifically the groups who are doing the work, that it should be everyone doing the work. So I think that that's definitely something that we can work on and continue to develop. But and also like we recently too got to meet with the SGA representative who was doing positive sexuality. So meeting with them and figuring out how we can get, like, let's say SGA into the conversation and things like that. So there are things happening. I've been meeting with a lot of people. So I think that a lot is in the works. So.
Are there any other questions that people didn't want to write down but would like to ask now? I imagine some of us will hang out for a bit, so if there are individual questions that you have that you didn't want to ask in the bigger group, please ask us. Also, if you come up with something after you digest some of this information over the next few days, reach out to us, call us, or email us. We want to be very encouraging of the questions. There's no stupid question. They're all really good. And also, if there's things that you feel like we're not doing that maybe we should be doing, we're always up for that conversation. It doesn't mean we'll necessarily do it the next day, but we want to hear about it so that we can engage in that conversation and consider, where we are missing or what else we can be doing as we move forward. Thanks a ton for being here. Thank you.